What's up, Chemical Guys family? Thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Detail Garage. Today we have AJ and his Rav4, and over the weekend he went up to the mountains, and that means it's collected dirt and sleet and all kinds of snow. So AJ, why don't you tell us a little bit what happened?
So we went up to the snow in Big Bear and it got covered in snow, but when we got back to Long Beach, I didn't know that it was gonna be covered in dirt just like this. So once all the snow melted off, it was like this. It was covered in mud, it was covered in dirt.
And you're probably wondering why the wheels look a little bit cleaner or the top looks a little bit cleaner. It's because it's harder for things to stick to those things, especially with rotational force that'll fling it off the wheels. And on flat panels, it's hard for snow to stick, especially as you're driving. So the size is where it really flings up and sticks, and that's why we have this layer of abrasive dirt and particles. So we're gonna safely remove it today without scratching the surface. But before we do that, AJ's new to detailing, right?
Yes.
So we're gonna go over the proper steps of how to wash your vehicle from top to bottom, starting at the wheels, which, as we mentioned, aren't that dirty. So we're gonna go through a few products and get a look at its best. Alrighty guys, so to start off, we're going to clean the wheel wells and the wheels because obviously this is always gonna be the dirtiest area on any vehicle. But we have plastic wheel well liners and suspension components, so rather than just going right into scrubbing it or spraying it down with a degreaser, we're going to rinse it down using the snubby. And this is also attached to an electric pressure washer because a lot of you guys ask, what are we using in the video? So today we're testing out an electric pressure washer that has 1800 PSI, and it's great for gently cleaning any kind of surface around the vehicle, so it's perfect for automotive detailing. So we'll start by rinsing it down. And then we'll also be using All Clean, which is an all-purpose degreaser. Just spray that directly onto the surface. And we're gonna use it at full strength because there's still a lot of grime in there. Although this is a new vehicle, there's like grease or something built up in the wheel well liner. So using it at full strength will make it a lot easier to remove any kind of staining or any kind of messes. And this is also safe to use around the vehicle on your tires or on your gloss finish wheels. But for today, we're gonna focus mainly on the wheel well because that's where all of the snow and dirt and everything else along that road trip has built up inside of there. And to help us agitate, we're going to be using a long-handled green flag brush, and this is just a soft bristle brush that's going to help us work our way all the way to the back of the wheel well liner because you could use a small bristle brush or a small handle brush, but rather than getting ourselves dirty, we're just going to use the long handle. This makes it a lot easier to work around these tight crevices. This way, as you look inside of the wheel well, you'll see just clean suspension parts, and you can also use this on your undercarriage as well. I know a lot of guys ask us as well as what to use for your undercarriage, especially when you got lifted trucks or off-road vehicles. All Clean is a great way to remove off-road messes, such as clay or mud or stubborn grime. And then you grab yourself a green flag tip brush to gently scrub it so you don't scratch any kind of surfaces, whether it's plastic or painted, powder coated, chrome or anything like that. It just gently cleans it without scratching. And then to prevent any kind of future staining, after we clean it and dry it, we can protect this using either a dressing or a protectant such as bare bones, and that's going to restore a deep gloss to your suspension components again, and also to any kind of plastic pieces underneath the vehicle. Now we're going to move on to rinsing it, and then we can jump on the wheel and get looking its best. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are asking, you could probably just rinse it down with a pressure washer and be done with it, but just as we saw, rinsing down the wheel well liner alone wasn't enough to remove any of the dirt and anything that built up inside there. And same thing with the wheel, there's a lot of brake dust that's accumulated on the surface, and that's really abrasive and it's also corrosive. So to gently remove that, we're going to be using a Ducky foam sprayer, which aerates as you spray, and it's been diluted with Diablo 3:1 because Diablo comes as a gel, so it's a concentrate, and as you dilute it, it makes it easier to work with and spray, such as we're going to do here today. Spraying it in between the spokes, the lug nuts, the valve stem, all the way to the back of the barrel, and it's even safe for your rotor and caliper. And then to help us agitate as well, we're going to be using a red rocket brush, which has these nylon bristles. And it's coated with a layer of foam right now because we want to have that cleaning power, but it's also going to gently remove anything that's on the surface while gliding because the foam acts as a lubricant. as well as a detergent to help us thoroughly clean the surface. And just working away from top to bottom, you can work in a clockwise motion or a counterclockwise motion, but all the dirt's gonna fall from the top as you work your way around. So rather than making more work for yourself, start at the top and then work your way all the way around the wheel. And to clean the face of the wheel, you can use your green flag tip brush again. And just run it across your dirt trap in your wash bucket. This way, not only the face, but also the whole wheel itself is going to be clean. You can get into more intricate areas such as the lug nuts or the valve stem, or tight crevices using a smaller brush such as the boar's hair brush. And then lastly, we're going to clean these wheels because although they look really dark, there's probably some kind of layer of grime on there, old dressings, any kind of dirt. And also because we're all learning how to detail today, we're going to be just doing the proper steps. So using a nifty brush, this has a smaller profile and also a stiffer bristle, so it makes it easier to work on these areas such as the profile of the tire. And again, working from the top, we're going to work our way around the wheel and then just get it looking its best by removing any kind of old dressings, grease and grime. And as it turns brown, you can tell that you're removing any kind of filth. And then we'll just rinse it away. And you can dry the surface, or since we're going to be washing the vehicle, it's going to get wet again, and we can dry it all at the same time. So after cleaning the wheels and also the wheel well liners, we're going to move on to the body of the vehicle. We already have two buckets set up here, and AJ is going to explain why we use that in all of our videos and why it's so important to use it with your detailing process.
So we have our 2-bucket method here, which means that we're gonna have a rinse bucket and we're gonna have a wash bucket. So our wash bucket is gonna contain our soap. So this is gonna be where we're gonna put our 2 ounces of soap. And this one is where we're gonna rinse off our mitt just to make sure we don't carry any more dirt and grime onto the vehicle. We do have 2 dirt traps in here. We have a black and a red. We're color coding it so we know which one's which.
Correct, and also that dirt trap is going to help filter out any of the abrasive particles that are on your wash mitt or your sponge, because it's going to force it underneath those cones, and that keeps it out of the water, whether it's your fresh water or your rinse water, and it's also going to prevent it from coming back to the vehicle so it's not further damaging it or scratching the surface.
So we're gonna go ahead and start off by rinsing the vehicle.
So we're also going to be using a snubby, which is going to allow us to work around the vehicle without having to maneuver a wand, but also a lot of people ask us how much range or how far should they be away from the vehicle when using a pressure washer. You want to have at least 18 inches between the surface, especially on the glass or rubber seals or even on the paintwork, because it's still sensitive and using a lot of PSI can damage those kind of things. But because we're using an electric pressure washer, that means we're using less PSI. And also this is going to be a great way to just gently knock down the heavier stuff, any loose debris, and then we can move on to the foaming process.
So we already finished rinsing down the vehicle. As you can see that all the dirt and grime didn't really come off with just rinsing down the vehicle. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to foaming it with our max release foam cannon. This is gonna be great for covering the surface of the vehicle since it's a lot bigger vehicle. And we're gonna be using citrus washing gloss. Citrus washing gloss is gonna be great for taking off all that dirt and grime. It's a really deep cleaner.
It's a deep cleaner, but it's also a super concentrated cleaner. So before we start, we're gonna shake it up. This mixes the entire solution together. And we're gonna add a couple ounces to our wash bucket as well as to the foam cannon, giving it the same ratio, just a couple ounces. This way we have the same cleaning power, but also the same lubrication. You can just stir that together.
So why do we stir the bottle instead of shaking it?
That's a good question, and also a common when we get here. So the reason being is that when you shake the bottle, you're actually creating the foam inside of the canister, and by the time it comes out of the siphon tube and out of the tip of the nozzle, it's already lost a lot of that foaming action. So gently stir it together, and that's going to give you that perfect solution. But also you can improve your foaming action by using warm water, which helps to, again, give you that thicker suds. So AJ's going to go ahead and foam up the vehicle, and then we can move on to the actual wash process, because like you saw, rinsing it down didn't do anything for removing a lot of the dirt. So the foam is going to help soften it and also encapsulate it so we can gently wipe it off the surface. And also, since we're using citrus wash and gloss, again, it's a concentrated cleaner that works well on any kind of vehicle, but on white, it makes that paint really pop.
Let's get foaming.
So after letting the foam dwell for a few moments, it's had time to soften up any abrasive particles, and it's also helping to carry off those kind of dirt and grime. Now AJ is going to use a chenille microfiber wash mitt, which is made of microfiber, and it's going to help gently carry and also trap anything that's on the surface so it doesn't scratch. And he's going to load it up using our fresh water bucket or the soap water bucket. Working in linear motions is going to prevent any kind of scratches and swirls, because even though the paint is white, that doesn't mean that it's not going to scratch the same way that a dark color would. It just means that you can't notice it as obviously. So using the linear motions, working from top to bottom, is going to be the best way to prevent any kind of paint imperfections.
And then we're gonna go ahead and put it into our rinse bucket and scrub it against the dirt trap so we can make sure we're not gonna transfer any more dirt back onto the vehicle and cause more scratching. There we go, and then go ahead and wring it out. And put it back into the soap bucket, and then we're gonna continue with the wash. So we're gonna go ahead and time lapse this whole wash, so enjoy. Look at that.
Alrighty guys, as our final step for the wash process, we obviously need to dry it to prevent any kind of water spots, but to also prevent any kind of scratches and swirls, we're going to be using one of my favorite towels, which is the Woolly Mammoth. This is a very soft plush pile, and also these silk banded edges would help to absorb a ton of water without scratching the surface. So AJ and I are going to jump on that, but in the meantime, you guys can check out all these products on our website, chemicalguys.com, or your local detail garage. If you like today's video, or if you like pressing buttons, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also show some love for AJ being on his first video here, and also being a newbie. It's kind of hard being up here in front of the camera, but drop your comments down below for some love for AJ, and also anything else you guys want to talk about. We'll see you guys next time right here in the detail garage.